Hey, what's happening, everyone? I hope everybody's good today. So I was sitting around at home, and in my goal of putting out some content on a daily basis, in my goal of trying to put out content every day, I was like, man, some days it can be really tough editing videos, especially some of my older videos. Man, some of those I have to do so much work. I have to do so much editing. I have to cut so much out because of all my stuttering and stammering as I go, especially when I first started doing this. But I feel like I flow a whole lot better. And so I just wanted to come to y'all, and I want to interact with you all more and more. I'd like to sit down and just have some simple conversations and just see what's on your mind. What topics are pressing? What topics concern you in the area of law enforcement or anything to do with it? Whether it's a current issue of defunding the police or abolishing the police, or whether you have questions, maybe you're someone who's aspiring to become or get into law enforcement. Any question you have, or you just want to know my opinion on X, Y, and Z topic, whatever it may be, feel free to hit me up and just ask. Post your comments in the chat, and we will get this whole conversation up and running. So, but as the comments begin collecting in the chat, I came across a very interesting article. I get a lot of stuff in my email. Hey, what's up, Patrick? How you doing, brother? I came across an email and of a study by the Statista group, and it was something I really wanted to share with y'all as we move on here. Let me pull this up here real quick, make it bigger. It talks about the number of people shot to death by the police from 2017 through 2021, and even though 2021 isn't over with yet, obviously, y'all know this topic is very near and dear to my heart. I think at the core of the current social justice movement, in particularly all this talk, this anti-police rhetoric that we get a lot, is this issue. At the very heart of it, this is probably the biggest issue. I don't know if y'all agree or not. If you disagree, I'd love to hear it. But I think that this is one of the biggest issues, whether it's the allegations of excessive force by the police quote unquote hunting down black men, whether it is the allegation of the school to prison pipeline and all those different things. And let me see, waiting on, I hope you don't mind me posting this, brother. Waiting on a meeting, sober 8 months, all to the glory of God. Amen, brother, amen. I'll definitely keep you in prayer, man. I hope by God's grace, he keeps you strong and you continue to do the work that's necessary on your part, man. So God bless you, man. No question. Okay, I got a quick question here real fast here. Let me see if I can get to this. What's up, James? Hey, Eric, are you alarmed with the number of Leos retiring? Let me answer that as I go on before I jump in, because I see you had a few more questions here, I believe. To a large degree, I am. It's how do I put it? It's unfortunate, because if I was currently working, especially in a city that was very anti-police, like if I lived in a very liberal city. Now, I know not all these liberal cities are like that. Well, I would almost, as far as I know, every one of them that I'm familiar with that has deep liberal roots politically, they all seem to be moving down this defunding path, or a high percentage of them. I'll say that to be safe. So if I was a cop and I was policing in a city like that, let me go back to being full screen here real quick. If I was a cop and I was policing in a city like that, I don't blame these guys for being disheartened and feeling like you are in a position to where you're in a position where you feel like you're no longer needed. And I know that there are a lot of cops out there who are like, man, I'm out here doing the best I can. But anytime a incident pops up that's even slightly questionable, the assumption is automatic that the cop was in the wrong, or the cop, and God forbid, Lord forbid, that if the person on the other side, if the cop was white and the person on the other side was black, especially if they were black, it is almost universally assumed by those with that mindset, the more progressive of us, that the cop did what he did simply because the suspect, the citizen, was black. And if I had to hear that, if I was a white cop and I was working in a city like that, where I heard that over and over and over again, I could see why they'd be disheartened and be retiring. If not picking up and saying, if not retiring, picking up and moving to a town or a city that is a bit more cop friendly. I think the two incidents that really stirred me up to realize how bad things were getting was the three. Rayshard Brooks. What was the other one? Rayshard Brooks. What am I thinking? Oh, the Ma'Khia Bryant, most recently. And what was the one? Give me a second here. I got to check back and look at my old videos here. Whoops, sorry about that. I'm on my YouTube channel there. Let me know if my audio is coming through, y'all. If my audio is coming through okay. I just want to make sure that there aren't any issues there. But yeah, it was the Rayshard Brooks. I'm skimming through real quick. Ma'Khia Bryant, so I can remember this dude's name here. And Jacob Blake. Those are the ones. Sorry about that. Sweet. Jacob Blake, Rayshard Brooks, Ma'Khia Bryant. All of those cases, let me go through each one of them. Ma'Khia Bryant, that had to have been the worst of them all. That had to have been, Jacob Blake, that had to have been the worst one of them all. You had a young woman trying to stab two people on video. The cop shows up to a dynamic situation, something that's happening right then, right there, and he is forced to make a split-second decision at the risk of potentially, because if he didn't, the risk of someone being severely injured or killed was very real. And the mere fact that there were some knuckleheads out there who were trying to vilify these cops, LeBron James, and especially people with a platform, like, so irresponsible, like, it's sickening. Pushing that the cop was in the wrong, and then some of these brilliant folks out there saying, oh, black folks have been having knife fights for years, and all of a sudden you want to bring a gun. Yeah, you bring a gun to a knife fight. This ain't like in the movies, somebody pulls, or like I always like using the analogy of the Michael Jackson Beat It video. Someone pulls a knife, you pull out a knife, and you go at it, and you see who's the best man or best person, best woman. That's nuts. You bring the potential for deadly force to an encounter. You open the door up to whatever comes your way. That's my perspective. And then if we look at the Rayshard Brooks incident, dude was drunk. The cop gave him multiple times to park his car, let him sleep it out. If you watch the full video, multiple occasions, the guy kept falling asleep. Eventually get to a point where you're like, I got to do my job. So they go to make the arrest. Dude's all perky now. He's wide awake. Gets up, starts fighting the cops, takes off running, gets the taser from the officer, which if used on him, who knows what his intentions were. Maybe his intentions were just to get away. I don't know. Cops can't read minds. He fires the taser. The officer shoots him, kills him. Weeks prior, that same DA in the same city vilified another officer for using a taser on some college students, basically saying that he used deadly force on them. But now all of a sudden, it's no longer a deadly force incident. And then we're talking about Jacob Blake. There's him fighting the cops. There's video with him holding a knife in his hand. All that was irrelevant. And so if you're out there policing in this day and age, you're a cop. You're trying everything in your power to do the right thing. But everywhere you go, every news channel, in the communities, it was already rough enough for a lot of cats in a lot of these communities. But in some of these really bad cities, you're just public enemy number one. There's nobody coming trying to, or very few people, especially with this current administration. These folks don't give a crap about cops. Oh, they're trying to act like they care about law enforcement during this whole Capitol riot, or, calling it an insurrection and exaggerating and overblowing it. I'm not saying there was nothing to sneeze at and to ignore. People went overboard. It was a riotous situation in there, no question about it. But in light of everything we dealt with over this past year and a half, man, miss me with this nonsense talking about how destructive and dangerous it was to our Constitution. BS. You had political actors in our nation burning down, killing people, attacking people for political gain by the hundreds of thousands across our nation, letting people know what their motivations were. They wanted change, and if they didn't get change, they were going to destroy property, jack people up, do whatever it takes to get people to pay attention. That is the definition of terrorism. But no investigation for that. And we know there won't be one, or if there is one, it'll be a joke. But yet everybody wants to look at this whole Capitol incident like it was the worst situation that we have ever seen as a nation. BS. Total BS. So I went off on a tangent, brother. I know I didn't finish your question. And what sort of people what sort of people are they being replaced with in these liberal strongholds? That's the big concern, because there's so much about equity. They have such an emphasis on equity, not equality, but equity, meaning equal outcome, that ultimately they're going to bring the standards down. It's tough hiring. First, when people ask the question about why aren't there more black people in law enforcement, you deal with the issue of, one, that the cultural stigma in many minority communities, black, Hispanic, especially in the black community, against law enforcement. You have that cultural stigma. If you want to be a cop, you're a snitch and all this kind of stuff. You're a sellout. You have to deal with that. Or you can go work in a prison. You can be a CO. That's okay in a lot of places. But if you're saying you're going to be a police officer, if you're saying you actually want to police your former communities, or in the inner city, or wherever it is you're policing, you want to do that job, how dare you? So one, you have the stigma, the cultural stigma. I was on the African American Recruitment Council here in Las Vegas when I worked for Las Vegas Metro Police. And they were talking about wanting to go into these communities and talk to some of these young people to get people thinking differently, because they were wondering, how can we get more minorities on the job? So they were like, well, we're going to go to the high schools and we're going to have seminars and this and that. And I just raised my hand. I said, if you wait until they hit high school, you've already lost. Now you'll find some. You may find a few, but you need to impact some of these young folks, black folks, young kids, young. Because I told them there is a stigma within the black community that if you're trying to be a cop, that you're a sellout, you're Uncle Tom, you're House N-word, you're all that. And you have to impact that. And of course, there's the role of the individual officer. I used to get on some of the guys I used to work with. I used to tell them, do whatever you can. I know some days you're going call to call, and you don't have time to stop and interact, and especially on certain shifts in certain parts of town. Here in Vegas, it can be really crazy. But do the best you can when you have the time. Get out of your car and interact with people in some of these areas. They have to humanize you. You have to humanize yourself. They have to see you as something other than just simply a badge who wants to just come out and bust heads and snatch people off to jail. You have to let them know you're a person just like them. Get out and start just having small talk, conversations. So where the point they get used to seeing you come around. At first, it's probably going to be awkward for them, maybe even for you. But the more you do that, you humanize yourself. But back to the main point, when it comes down to getting people to think differently about law enforcement, if you want to get a more quality level of candidate, you have to influence people at a younger age so they make better choices. As they get older, they're not going to be out there just smoking weed all the time. They're going to try to be productive citizens. They're going to try to make career choices and personal choices that put them in a position to where they can be a better candidate. Maybe join the military, whatever it may be. But when you're in these places that are getting rid of cops, and then now all of a sudden they want to fund cops, because in law enforcement, just like in the military, there's a big conservative mentality. Or I should say there are a lot of conservatives in the military, a lot of conservatives in law enforcement. Not universal. You have a wide variety of schools of thought and ideas, but there is a large contingency of people who lean more conservative in those areas. And so now that they push to defund, and a lot of cops have left or are leaving, you can only imagine the folks that will be coming in, and the policies and things that they will actually. So when you have laws, when they start changing the laws and they start coming after folks like me and some of y'all who are paying attention, you can only imagine some of the laws that are going to be they're going to try to work up or create in order to shut down people who think differently. And let me see what else you got. Seems like these new officers will be indoctrinated by the left and willing to violate the Constitution. That's it, brother. That's it. That's where we're at. That's the danger. That's my biggest concern. I used to say that they might be pushing some form of national police agency, and I think there still might be a push to that because they want people to be on the same page when it comes to use of force and things like that. So that's still a possibility. But it also could be more of this individualized push within different cities and counties and states and jurisdictions to follow along with some of their more radical beliefs. And you get people who are in the job, who knows what'll open up. Excuse me. My big question is, though, I mean, there are liberal cops. We all know that. And there are progressive cops. But when it comes down to it, when you have to go on gun, when you have to draw your gun down on the suspect, I just kind of wonder how many people with that mindset are willing to do that job. I think that the pickings will be very, very slim. I could be totally wrong, but those are just my thoughts. Thanks for that one, brother. That was an excellent question, man. Really got the ball rolling. LeBron James is a perfect example that just because you're a millionaire doesn't mean you're a bright individual. I can't argue with you that, man. And I've always been a supporter of LeBron James over the years. I love his basketball game, but the more he talks on these issues that he is completely ignorant of, the more I just can't support the dude. Like I said, I haven't really been paying attention much to the league. My boys were in town for the summer, so I actually spent a little time watching some of the games because they love basketball. And one of them really wants to make it to the league. That's one of his goals. But you have so many people. I think that's what frustrates me. I don't know if there's much out there that frustrates me more than people speaking in areas that they're ignorant of. That I don't know, that totally irritates the mess out of me. If you don't know what you're talking about, then don't comment. Or to put it bluntly, shut up. I've had people who had the nerve to try to tell me about police tactics, who have never done anything tactical a day in their life, not even training, probably not even paintball, never been through a tactical scenario, a tactical class, let alone actually being on the streets or being deployed somewhere where you actually had to put some tactics to use. That drives me nuts. I'm like, I said to one dude, like, man, it'd be like me walking into your classroom. He was a school teacher and trying to tell you how to do your job. But on making that argument, or on that case, I've actually trained people. I've actually stood in front of a classroom and taught people on a large scale before, throughout my military and police days, and before that, when I was practicing karate back in the day. So I have some knowledge in that department, but I'm not going to sit up there and try to tell you how to be a school teacher for whatever grade you're in, middle school, whatever it may be. I'm not going to just make blanket statements like that. Even worse, when you're talking about situations that are potentially life and death. Drives me nuts. Drives me nuts. But I try to be cool, especially if they're brothers in Christ. But I'll block you in a heartbeat if I see where you ain't trying to be you're not even remotely open to learning. I'll block you. I can still love you. I just ain't got to talk to you all the time. I mean, I don't know. Some of y'all may think I'm wrong for that, but that's just the way I look at it. All right, let me see here. Patrick got another one here. I still think it was a bunch of paid leftists riding as conservatives. They've done it before at Trump rallies. Oh, that's very possible. I don't discount that at all. With everything I've seen over the way my eyes were opened up, because for years I used to tell people, I've shared this story before, and I wish I could find the video. This might be a little longer here, but I remember when Trump first showed up saying he was running, I thought this dude was nothing but a rhino, another rhino. And I thought that he was just using the Republican conservative movement just to push his crazy Democratic policies. But, so I sat back and I was a major Ted Cruz fan. I thought Ted was a man with his background and all this kind of stuff. I said, Ted's the guy that should be should be president. Constitutional attorney, all that. So as time went on, I started seeing, even though I was not a Trump supporter by any stretch of the imagination, I started seeing the way he was treated in the media. I used to watch The Situation Room. Forgive me, y'all. I used to watch The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer like religiously every single day a few years ago. Even when I was no longer a Democrat, I still watched it on a basically daily basis. And then I saw them because Trump was kind of flip-flopping a bit on his stance on the border. And he had a town hall meeting, I think it was somewhere like in New Mexico or Arizona, don't quote me on that. And I think he was on there, and it was him and Sean Hannity. And he made his stance firm of what he believed and what his policy would be if he became president. The next day on The Situation Room, Wolf Blitzer says, lead story, Donald Trump flip-flops again after seeking to make a firm stance on what his policies are. He flip-flopped one more time. And then they showed him on his own personal plane at the time. He goes, I'm open. They show a short clip of him saying, I'm open to all kinds of things. I'm open to varying agreements and disagreements. And then they stop it right there. And then they start talking about how this man is not consistent. I said but there was something in the back of my head that it didn't settle. So I said, let me see if I can find this full interview. So I click over to Fox News, and I never watched Fox. I barely watch it now. And then they show the full interview. It's about a minute long. And he said that it had a completely different context when he talked about he had to be open on different ideas. But he said, and in this interview, he literally said, "But when it comes down to my stance on the border, I'm firm on it. There's no change." They literally cut off part of the interview in order to frame the story to make him look a certain way. Right then and there, I tell people, I wish I still had that episode. I wish I had that video clip, because that right there let me know that these people can't be trusted and that they were willing to go through any means to smear someone for political gain. And then, like I said, my whole process of waking up and learning just about the way the media is and how untrustworthy the mainstream media is, man, it was very eye-opening. Very, very eye-opening. So anytime they tell me something, I'm leery naturally. So that was pretty much how I got there. So when it comes down, so Patrick, back to my main point, or back to your question or your comment, I think that there was such a push to frame January 6th as an insurrection that I would not be surprised if there were paid actors who went in there. And like I said, we already heard that there were some people in there, that one young black dude, I can't remember his name, who is a radical leftist activist, who was trying to push people to violence. He was trying to incite violence. And there are other people that talk about it, that spoke about it. So I don't question that one bit. I guarantee you that there are more people that we just hadn't heard about who were involved. Edwin, what's up, my brother? How you doing, man? Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by, even if it's only for a moment. I appreciate the support. Let me see here. Benjamin, what's up, my man? How you doing? Do you think the National Academy Chief Program has had major influence on local law enforcement? The National Academy Chief Program? I'm not familiar with that, man. Honestly, I can't say I'm familiar with it. I talked with an old retired Denver PD lieutenant who brought this point up as historically, chiefs were hired in-house until recently with the influence of national academies. It's prestige. What I'm aware of is that they do have that FBI Academy. I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about. I do know that there are a lot of chiefs who go through that FBI Academy, and it adds credibility to them during the promotion process. If that's what you're talking about, then yeah, that's possible, man. That's very possible. Let me see here. What else we got? I know I missed a couple, so forgive me, y'all. I get going when I start talking. I'm so passionate about law enforcement and all things related. If y'all haven't figured that one out already, when these conversations get going and somebody asks a good question or makes a good comment, I could talk all day, literally. Just ask the family. Anyway, was curious if you had seen that at LVMPD too. I know that it's very helpful when people are moving up and move in the promotional process, because once you get to a certain point, when you become a lieutenant, yeah, you're still in the mix a little bit. You can be. Most of them aren't. I've had a few lieutenants over the years who they didn't care. They responded to calls. They backed you up going through doors, active shooter calls. They were there. One of them, she was awesome. She was only with us when I worked downtown Las Vegas. She was only with us for a short period of time. And she did motors. She rode a motorcycle, traffic lieutenant. And she was always coming up on these calls with no vest. And I was just like, ma'am, all due respect, please wear your vest or don't show up on my call. Because if something goes down and I remember you're not wearing a vest and you take fire, I'm going to be worried about you. And who knows how that can impact this entire call we might be on. So I used to tell her that, and she was like, okay, Muldrow. And then she finally went along with it. But yeah, it was, but I say once you get to lieutenant rank and you start getting captain, and depending on what city you're in, deputy chief, that's what we have here. It's no longer, you're a politician. You are a politician. And some of these folks lose sight on what it's like to be an officer, whether you're working in a jail or prison, or whether, you're in a courthouse or whatever, as a bailiff or a marshal, or or police in whatever capacity as a police officer, once you get to that certain level, you don't know what it's like to be the boot on the ground. I don't want to, and I don't want to make any blanket statements, but I do think it's a high percentage of them. They don't know what it's like anymore. They do their thing. They stay back. They deal with the administration. You hear people complaining about cops. You hear the citizens complaining about cops, and I'm not saying that those complaints aren't justified, but you hear plenty of citizens complaining about law enforcement, and it's almost like you start seeing things from a different perspective. And I'm not saying that's all around bad. That is only a bad thing, because if you stay one of the guys, so to speak, that can be problematic too, especially as a supervisor, especially as a leader. I think you have to do whatever you can to have a balanced approach. You can't lose sight on what it's like to be a cop, making dynamic decisions in high stress situations, but we also have to remember the perspective of the average everyday citizen. We have to remember that. So you have to find that balance between the two. But man, a lot of these cats, man, they just become politicians, and it's all about maintaining their position or keeping their job. And unfortunately, as this last year demonstrated, a lot of good cops are left hanging. There's no reason why a good cop should get suspended or terminated when he had a right to shoot, like in the Rayshard Brooks shooting. And I know they have a suspension policy typically when officers are involved in deadly force encounters, that they put them on administrative leave, not suspension, but they'll put them on an administrative leave in order to do the investigation, let them kind of cool down, calm down, perhaps seek out some counseling, because it can have a pretty powerful and devastating impact on people. But I think that throughout these situations, the officers are often forgotten, because the public outcry can be so great that the officer becomes a scapegoat. And that sickens me. That sickens me. And I would be embarrassed to be on any police department or be involved with any police or even me personally. I tried to be the guy who remained cool and calm and not get caught up in a lot of these heated debates and discussions when I was on the force. But the one thing the Army taught me was that the importance of leadership and how important it is to be a good leader. I mean, that's drilled in your head from day one. When my first day of basic training and throughout my career, I was blessed to work for a lot of good supervisors. I had a lot of good sergeants, very few good officers, but a lot of good sergeants. And it just taught me the value and the importance of leadership. And anytime I would see a police or corrections sergeant or lieutenant or captain or chief or sheriff even, who wasn't man or woman enough to step up and speak up for their officers, that irritated me, and I couldn't be silent. I wouldn't be disrespectful, but I'm not going to keep my mouth shut either. If you're in a position where you can speak up and defend your officer or come to their aid, help them out. I'm not talking about when they do wrong, but and even in some cases where they do wrong, because sometimes you just need a good stiff talking to, and then you're given an opportunity to correct yourself. But there are too many supervisors in law enforcement, and in every field for that matter. I don't want to single out law enforcement like it's something special or unique when it comes to the area of bad leadership. But I think the consequences can be very, very damaging, because if you were out there putting it on the line on a daily basis, potentially, in whatever capacity you work, and you don't even know that you can trust the people that are there to manage and supervise you, that's one of the worst feelings in the world as an officer. It's terrible. So I've always voiced my opinion. When I see people just doing stupid stuff, I've had trouble throughout the course of my career just keeping my mouth shut. I don't like, some people, believe it or not, I mean, Code Red Conversations is all about controversy because I basically go against the grain in every aspect. First and foremost, as a Christian man, as a Christ follower, I'm going against the grain. As a black conservative, I'm going against the grain. And then if you couple all that, 20 years in law enforcement, and then I'm outspoken. But in spite of all that, I don't like conflict. I don't like controversy. But it's like everything I've done in my career as an adult has been controversial fields, and I haven't been able to shy away from it. Not at all. Saul Fallon. I hope I say that name right. Is it Saul? Forgive me for that. God bless you, and God bless all of your dutiful law enforcement officers. So many of us support you. Amen. Praise God. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I know that there are some out there watching right now, and I know there'll be plenty who watch the replay down the road. But little things like that go a long way. And I don't think people realize that. Law enforcement is such a challenging position. I'm not saying every day is hard, every day is a grind. Most days for cops are pretty mundane, pretty routine. But every now and then, you get those calls that where the hair stands up on the back of your neck, obviously not on your head, especially if you're in my situation, but where the hair stands up on the back of your neck, you get chills running up and down your arms and your spine because you know that there's potential danger. You know it. When you get an officer who doesn't always freak out on every call, and he's pretty even-keeled, he's pretty calm, but he says, control, I need backup immediately, control, shots fired. There's nothing like that. I'm getting chills just thinking about it because I can think of a few incidents that I was in where that took place. And especially when you know the guy on the radio, you talk to him every day during briefing, and you hang out and you train together, and you laugh together, and you're there to back each other up. And then they call saying that they need backup, they need support, the shots are fired. You don't know what you're going to see upon arrival. Man, it's like so little things like that. Just saying, God bless law enforcement, despite all of its ails and woes and problems. I say it, I've said it once. If I've said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I truly believe that law enforcement is a righteous calling. I truly believe that when done rightly. When I wanted to be a cop, I've long wanted to be one when I was a kid, all the way back to where I was a kid. Most of my career was in corrections, but the tail end of my career, I got into actual patrol, police activities, police functions. But man, oh man, the cool thing about it is that while you're out there, you get it often, at least where I was at, some of the different places I worked. You had people out there who are very vocal, who are very vocal in their support of law enforcement. Yes, you'd probably dealt with more knuckleheads than not. And so the times that when those compliments came, or that show of support came, you really appreciate it. All my brothers and sisters out there who work in corrections, man, God bless y'all. Working in the prison, the jails, wherever you may be, juvenile detention, my heart truly goes out to you because you almost never get the attaboy, the pat on the back. Not saying that you need that to function at a high level, but you almost never hear it. So it's nice. It's nice to hear. It's very encouraging, and it's good, and it'll lift you up, definitely. Definitely. But if there's anyone who's here who has a question, maybe you're not the biggest fan of law enforcement, or maybe you want to understand why cops do what they do, why cops do X, Y, Z. I don't want to read your mind, but if there's something on your heart, so there's a question you may have, feel free to post it. Like I said when I initially put up this post, let's be respectful to one another. Don't come on here just throwing out a bunch of insults or negative comments. But I don't even want to say that. If you have a negative thought or negative comment, you can say it in a way that's not disrespectful or not assuming everyone in a particular class or group is evil. All cops are bad or whatever. Let's be adults here. If you're not a fan of the police, if you think police should be defunded or whatever, I would love to hear your comment. I'd love to hear your argument. And matter of fact, I'll even send you an invite and I'll bring you in. I'm sure I could figure that out. But yeah, there's an invite button down at the bottom. I've never used it, but we can figure it out. I would love to have a conversation right here and just to see your perspective and figure out why you feel that way. What's your justification for feeling that way? Okay. Hate, love, nothing. Greetings. I have 4 questions. Feel free. Thank you. Let me drink a little water. My voice is getting a little raspy. I was a little under the weather last week. Had a little something lasted for a couple of days. But I'm all about the natural healing. So every day I take vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, turmeric, curcumin, garlic. I take a lot of supplements, natural supplements. I don't take anything to get all buff or nothing like that. Those days are long gone. I want to be healthy inside. I go and I lift. I try to eat really good to keep the muscle built up, keep the muscle strong. But yeah, I got hit pretty good last week for a few days, but I think my immune system is probably firing better than it has most of my life. And I'm 51 years old now. So I'm feeling pretty good. But how do police officers deal with fear? Good question. Excellent question. I think that obviously it varies depending on the individual. I'll give you a scenario. The first time I really dealt with fear, I would say that it's for a significant level of fear. Now, when you're a trainee and you're going out there the first day in field training, you're going to have, if you don't really have a background that deals with that has put you in a situation and anything similar, you're going to deal with that. Now, the first day, you really don't know what you're doing. So I had a little bit of fear then. I just didn't want to kill anybody or just didn't want to get anyone killed. But one time we were at a hotel downtown. The call was that this lady said that this man was holding her hostage. And he was holding her hostage at gunpoint. Our sergeant or lieutenant called the SWAT team, let them know, SWAT commander. But for whatever reason, they decided that they weren't going to come out. So it was basically up to me and my squad and my sister squad mates to make entry into this hotel room and deal with the potential threat, not knowing what was on the other side of that door. And I might have been maybe 11 weeks into field training. Yeah, I was still in field training, 11 weeks in. So we borrowed a Halligan tool for any FD or EMTs or anyone who's ever done any type of emergency medical response. We ripped open the door, got a ballistic shield, and we stacked up behind that shield and we went in. And by God's grace, we handled the situation. It wasn't as bad as she made it out to be. But I remember before making entry in that door, I thought to myself for a second, man, this might be it. I honestly thought to myself for a second, this could be it. That guy, we can come busting through that door and that guy can fire out here and can hit one of us and it could be game over. But then as quickly as I thought that, I thought to myself, oh, hell no, this ain't it. Let's go. I mean, it was that quick of a mental switch in my head. And we went in there and we handled our business and everything turned out to be fine. But then throughout the course of my career, many times going into making entry into buildings with shooters and people mentally ill, mentally unstable, people with weapons, threats of people having guns on the other side, violent people, I remember one time going door to door, me, a sergeant, and one of my homeboys, we went door to door looking for a dude who was an attempted murder suspect. And we hunted this dude down and we found him. But I think you get to a point where you just have to realize that, yeah, it's okay to be afraid. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to admit that I've been fearful before during my career, but it's the whole courage, just acting in spite of the fear, knowing that you have people depending on you, knowing that your life depends on how you responding properly. And then also, there's nothing like building up your individual skill set. There's nothing like it. I was blessed as time went on. When I first went out there, despite my time in the Army, and this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, my Army time. But when I went out to the streets in 2006, my tactical skills were extremely rusty and not as good as I would have liked them to be. So I can recall even going to the academy, there was one guy who was a Marine Corps, he was a security detail, whatever they call it. Forgive me, any Marines out there. And then there was another dude who was Air Force Pararescue. He was attached to a SEAL Team 6. And there were days where I was like, I don't feel confident with my room search, with my room clearing skills. And this is during the academy. So we would meet every week and we would study together for the written exams, the weekly tests, and weekly or practical tests, and sometimes both. And I remember getting with those guys and they were just drilling me, like teaching me basic techniques, just cutting the pie as you turn corner. Now I knew some of this stuff because I had prepped myself prior to going out. And even as a corrections officer, I wanted to be squared away. I wanted to be knowledgeable on these topics. But they helped me build my skills up. And then in field training, we're doing room searches, building clearing on a nightly, daily basis, built my confidence up. After field training, on patrol, building your skills up. And then I was like one of those real geeky guys when it came down to training. I'd pay money out of my own pocket to go to classes. If I saw a class, an in-service class, I signed up for it and I went there. Later on in my career, I volunteered to become like a role player for the SWAT team because I was wanting to get on the SWAT team. And then there were days where they would train, after we helped them train, then they would put us through like an hour's worth of training to build our skills. And then I was blessed to have a 20-year, this was a very pivotal time, a 20-year SWAT veteran took me under his wing for like a year, and he trained me every week in room clearing, building searches, search warrant execution, you name it. This brother, hostage rescue, this brother took me under his wing and he drilled me until this stuff became second nature. And I was still on patrol doing my thing. And then I became an active shooter response. They call it MACTAC here. Multi-agency, I can't remember, tactical, I forget what it is. But it's like multiple agencies getting together and using their tactics and making sure a active incident is taken care of. So I took all those skills and it built up my confidence. So I think just being courageous in the face of knowing, based on the fact that that is what you do, this is your job. You have to interact in situations that are dangerous. There's no getting around it. How confident are you with your physical fitness? I CrossFitted, I trained regularly. I have a martial arts history dating back to when I was 16 years old. From karate to boxing to Muay Thai to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Judo to Jeet Kune Do to Krav Maga. I've trained in so many different arts. I was a defensive tactics instructor on the police department. So when it came down to hand, I felt confident for a lot of years. CrossFit increased my physical fitness. There were times where it wasn't as good as it should have been. And then going to the range weekly. I had a buddy of mine who, hopefully he's watching, Big John, you know you are. Much love to you, brother. I miss you. And he and I would go to the range on a weekly basis and we would just practice. And we would put each other through challenging drills. We would get drills from various military units, advanced drills. And we would work these drills over and over and over again to the point to where it was like, man, I knew I could take the shot. If I had to take a shot from a headshot that was kind of questionable, my confidence was there. So I think if you have an officer that cares that he or she is going to work on those holes in their game, they're going to understand that you have to be courageous based on the very nature of the job, and it'll help them improve. So I think that there are many ways people deal with it. It comes with the territory. There's no getting around it. So hopefully that answered your question. I know I kind of went off a little bit, but that's what I did. Next question here. If people have a negative feeling about cops, I recommend that they do a ride along. I totally agree. Next comment. Thank you, Haiping. I totally agree. A ride alongs, a citizens academy, those things can go a long way in opening eyes, because there's so many people who act or think like they know, and they don't. Let me tell you something. This is from a man who had a career in law enforcement. The first 13 years plus of my career, of my law enforcement career, was in a corrections capacity. The prison system, 3.5 years. County jail, I did for 10 years. Finished off them like my last 5 years on the streets in a variety of in different capacities. Most of it being patrol. And it was eye-opening for me. After all those years of working in that corrections environment, it was extremely eye-opening to me, the potential threats that are around you at every moment. When you first go out there, they always tell you keep your head on a swivel, and if you want to function and survive in law enforcement, you had better keep your head on a swivel, meaning basically keep looking around, know what is around you, know who's walking. Never allow yourself to be in a position where somebody walks up on you and you're not aware that they're there. Whether you're pumping gas, putting gas in your own vehicle, or whether you're just communicating with the average, some grandma, whoever it may be, you don't know what their intentions are, and you don't know what the intentions are of the dude driving down the road who wants to jump out and shoot you in the back of your head. It's possible, very possible. How often is it understood that peacekeeping is a role? Is this regional? How often is it understood that peacekeeping is a role? Is this regional? Could you clarify that? I'm really not 100% sure exactly what you meant. So I don't want to assume your answer. I don't want to assume your question. I want to give you a good answer. Let's see what you posted something else after. What happens when friendships compromise protocol with officer to officer or civilian to officer? I would say that, especially in a supervisory capacity, this is where I'm most familiar with it. But I do have situations where people expected you to act a certain way because they're your boy. And if they did something stupid, they assume that you're going to cover for them. But I always had a response for that. But I think when it comes down to being a supervisor, I think that there's a difficult balancing act that you have to do, because one, of course, you want to build friendships or build a good camaraderie with your guys, but you also have to remember that you are their boss, that you are their supervisor. So I think you have to find that difficult balance in between being the guy who manages them, disciplines them when necessary, but is also not a jerk and can be cool. I think too many times people take extremes, one extreme or the other. And it is a difficult balancing act, because on one end, you don't want to be the jerk that no one likes, but you also don't want to be officer or sergeant friendly, everybody's buddy. So when bad things happen, you have no control. And they don't respect you enough because all you guys do is kick it all the time. I knew some sergeants that hung out with their guys on a weekly basis, and I just thought that was silly, personally. because I think it's just opening up the door to all kinds of problems. What happens, or even compromise, potentially? What happens when they do something wrong? Are you going to say, hey, man, let's talk about this? Like, what happened? And apply the appropriate amount of discipline when necessary? Or are you going to say, hey, okay, come on over here, man. Let's make sure you get this paperwork right. So here's what I want you to write. And that does happen. That does happen, unfortunately. So I think that there can be that compromise at times when people don't do the, don't take that, don't more deeply consider the potential damage that can come. And when it says with officer to officer or civilian to civilian officer, let me get back to officer to officer. If anyone is familiar, let me post a link in here real quick. I want to post a link to one of my videos. If you're new to my channel and you haven't checked out some of my content, or don't even know who I am, for instance, you may not even know, like, who is this dude sitting up here talking like he knows what he's talking about? Let me pull up this video here real quick. I gotta mute this. I hope it doesn't, you don't start hearing it here. Make sure I mute it real quick. Okay. I'm gonna share this video here real quick. It is, I did a presentation last year in Tennessee where I had a blessed opportunity to be able to give a presentation called, and I've given it in Chicago, I've given it in here multiple times, Tennessee, but it's a presentation called Police Brutality, Separating Fact from Fiction. Let me post a link here in the comments. Do yourself a favor. I think it'll be a blessing to you. It's loading up. I believe it'll be a blessing to you, but yeah, it should be there. Let me know if it shows up, y'all. Okay, yeah, it's there. You probably have to cut and paste it. But I talk about an incident early on in my career where, while going through field training, that's how early, where I was in a position where I had to, when I was challenged to compromise or speak up, real early. We're talking day one of field training. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details here. You have to check out that video, the presentation. It's early on. I think I talk about it in the first 15, 20 minutes or so, where I address the issue. But I was forced to make I had to make a tough decision, knowing that this could affect my career in the long term. And I was kind of like, what do you do? And so I know that throughout the course of my career, I've been put in situations where I was challenged to, hey, man, you know, why don't you just look the other way? All I know is I have to lay my head down and know I did the right thing each and every day. I have to live with me. I have to live with the consequences of my actions. And I'm not trying to sit here before y'all and try to act like I was some super righteous cop and I always did everything right. That would be a lie. And I'm not going to do that. But I think that consistently, I always sought to do the right thing. I failed many times, but I always sought to do the right thing. I know that there are a lot of people in law enforcement. It does happen. You get to the point to where you want to make sure your buddy doesn't get in trouble. And you sometimes say, well, I didn't see anything. Well, you know you did. Or sometimes you're in a position to where you just might fudge the information. It's legit, y'all. It happens. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're lying to you. Now, does it happen on the scale that a lot of people try to say nowadays? I don't think so. I don't think so. But it is a reality. I think we as individuals, but there are many agencies nowadays that point out that make it really tough. If you get caught lying, that's a terminable offense. Like almost, not automatically, you have to go through the process. But that was one thing I was glad that my old department, Metro, here in Vegas, established. Was that if lying, it was truthfulness at all times. Do not get caught in a lie. If you get caught in a lie, you can be gone. And I think that is what's needed, because we are public servants in law enforcement. You are a public servant. You are expected to act a certain way. And they are right in having higher expectations for you. So Yeah, that's my take on that. Last question. Are there officers with mental issues? How are they selected for or detected? Oh, absolutely. I know more than a few officers who are taking some type of antidepressant or something along those lines. Now, some of it was developed over the years of seeing crappy things. I think some of them came in with low-level issues, and I think it depending on the severity of it, obviously, because you don't want somebody who's freaking completely like bipolar or something like that doing the job. You want someone who's mentally alert and coherent and aware of what's going on. But I think that it'd be difficult to really get on if you have anything significant initially. But it can develop over the years. I've seen it. And I think that officers, that's where accountability comes in. When it comes to the sergeants, when it comes to fellow officers, if you see one of your homies or another officer just doing stuff just ridiculous, you got to call it out. If you see one of your buddies is drunk all the time, and I know that's not necessarily mental illness, but using that as an example of seeing someone acting in a way outside of their character or acting in a way that's potentially harmful to them or to someone else, we as officers have to be willing to speak up during these controversial times. We got to do it. Not only for the trust of the citizens, but for your boy. If you really care about them, if you truly care about them, if they're your partner or they're your homeboy, we got to look out for them. And sometimes some people are just too stubborn to know what's good for them. I had one of my boys, he was just a mess. Love him like a brother, but he was just a train wreck at times. Officer-wise, on duty, one of the best officers you'll ever find. But personally, he had a lot of issues. And so I think that it can be detected by a good supervisor paying attention. Sometimes you get enough citizen complaints to where their supervision starts to see a pattern. And if more officers, and because primarily we're the ones who deal with some of these guys on a more consistent basis, we have to be more willing to step up and speak up and call these problems, and maybe even say, hey man, you need to go up and say something, because I think, what's going on? Because I think you need some help. Excellent question though. Hate, love, nothing. You have to give me your real name one day, but great question. Excuse me. Thank you for answering. I don't know much about law enforcement, so I'm not always sure what to ask. Whatever pops in your head, ask. I can almost guarantee you it ain't gonna hurt my feelings. So you're good there. Let me see here. Great idea about ride-along for those who don't appreciate our officers. Absolutely. That goes a long way. I've seen minds changed and hearts changed after a few ride-alongs or a hectic day on patrol. I've seen people who weren't the biggest fans of cops, didn't have a whole lot of respect for them, change their minds. But I always say, if you can get into a citizens academy, I wish that there were more entities out there who would do the scenario-based thing. That's something I'm looking to do down the road, so keep me in prayer for that, y'all. Are officers supposed to be peacekeepers, is what I meant. Oh, yes. Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, on almost every situation, the vast majority of situations that an officer is on, or that they'll find themselves on, is not where you pull out your gun. A lot of times you do a lot of talking, excuse me, and a lot of listening. Quick example, and I'll keep it quick this time. There was a couple that called for domestic issues all day long. By the time I showed up on their call, I was probably the fifth officer that came out to that house throughout the course of the whole day. Got there around 9 o'clock at night. She's complaining. He's talking crazy to me. He's doing this. He's like, she doesn't trust me, and they're going back and forth. And I'm like, you can't keep calling here for these petty issues. And it was a busy night. There are a lot of us out here. We're humping, we're running each and every night. We're running call to call, and we got to keep coming here. So I just said, okay, instead of fussing at these guys, let me just sit back and talk to them and hear them out. So I was there probably a good 45 minutes just as a listener or as a peacekeeper. Listen to him, listen to her, listen to him some more, listen to her a little bit more, went back and forth. Finally, I said, my man, this doesn't seem like it's going to get better tonight. I think your best bet is to pick up and go somewhere and maybe spend a couple of days. Is there any way you can get up and go somewhere for a few days? Or even if it's just one day? He said, yeah, let me call my brother. He calls his brother. I go in there and I'm talking to her while he's on the phone with his brother. He says, yeah, he's going to come get me. She's all saying, I don't want him to leave. I said, but look at everything that's happening. It's nothing but tension between y'all. I think the best thing that could happen is for him to step away. You get cool down. He gets to cool down. And then you guys try to work it out when you get back. I waited till the brother came and got him. Then they left. When I left, I had other officers say, man, Muldrow, you sure spent a whole lot of time on that call. And I said, if the first officer that had went there at 10 o'clock in the morning had done what I did, we wouldn't have to waste all that manpower going back over there. Sometimes all people want is for someone to listen to them. That's all they want. So we have to understand that. And the primary role of, I believe, of a officer is to be a peacekeeper. Hello, Sharon. How are you? Thanks for swinging by and checking out my live. I hope y'all check out that link. Let me put it on the main screen here for some reason. Okay, here we go. I posted this link right here to one of my videos. And if you're watching this right now and you're not a subscriber, what are you waiting on? Go check out my YouTube channel. I guarantee you, if you want to learn about policing, law enforcement, and get a pretty balanced approach, come check out Code Red Conversations. You will be blessed. I promise you that. And plus, feel free, if you really like any of my videos, share them, because I really want my message to spread. More people need to hear the truth behind law enforcement. More people need to hear that. Let me see here. How does the criminal underworld work exactly? Is it interconnected? To some degree. I think the vast majority of criminal offenders work by themselves. They just kind of do their own thing. And this is my experience as a guy who almost lived when you were working in a corrections environment with people who are saturated or digging deep, rooted in the criminal element. If you're talking about, excuse me, a little burp. I don't want to burp in front of y'all. If you're talking about a gang, you have some gangs that are way more organized. When I was a corrections officer while living in Indiana, you had a lot of vice lords and gangster disciples. You're talking about organized crime. That's the gangster disciples. Extremely, extremely organized. But then you go to the West Coast out here in Vegas, when they come into the jail system, they're very disorganized. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So I think that when it comes down to criminal element, it depends on who you're talking to, what entity you're talking to. Now, there's some people that have rings, and because we had some people who were Southsiders, or like as far as some of the Mexican gangs, and there were associates, a very few, but there were some who were associates with higher levels of organized crime, like Mexican mafia members, people like that. People from up north in Northern California, like, what do they call them? Norteños? Yeah, Serranos from like the southern part of Southern Nevada, Southern California, and Norteños, people from like Central and Northern California. So there's a lot more organization going on there. So it all depends. And when you're talking about gangs, but if you're talking about other groups and stuff like that, I would say the vast majority of criminals out there are people who just kind of run and do their own thing. And if you're out there slinging dope, you might be stepping on someone's toes, and then that could become more dangerous for you as an individual. because a lot of times you have turf and places like that that might be gang related. Is it interconnected? How do high-level criminals even come in contact with their enforcers? I'm sure they have chains. When you're talking about groups, because I worked as a gang intelligence officer in the county jail, and I did that for about 3 years. That was probably my all-time favorite job that I did as an officer in law enforcement throughout the course of my career. I loved that job. We worked with FBI, CIA on some occasions. We worked with homicide, gangs, narcotics. I mean, we ran the gauntlet of people we worked with, Homeland Security, you name it. And we got to do some really, really cool things. And that's what really kind of reignited the fire for me wanting to go out to the streets, be a police officer. Because I was pretty content with being a CO. But you come to a point where you understand that if you're talking about organized crime, you have hierarchies, and you have people who do the bidding for other people. Because if you're talking about a big dog, somebody who's really connected, somebody who's like the main man on top, when we're talking about way more organized groups, I think like even some of your motorcycle gangs, more organized motorcycle gangs might have aspects of that. But when you're talking about like Mexican mafia groups or some of these other organizations, you definitely have people who, Mexican mafia, drug cartels, you definitely have people who are in these places who dole out orders, and then things are passed down. And even in the jail setting, you have that. Because you can have a shot caller, what they call a quote-unquote shot caller in the jail or prison setting. I could be on the dormitory, and it's just a matter of time before you figure out who's in charge and who isn't. If you have any type of experience in that field, you start to see who's in charge, who's running things, and who isn't. And you start to see who the runners are, or who I forget the term they used to use for people who kind of go and do hits or whatever, and then they come back. I forget the term they used to use. But I would say, and that was primarily from here in Vegas, that was primarily from the Mexican gangs. You had some of that when it comes to the black gang members, but it wasn't that much organization. It wasn't nearly to that degree. Excellent question. Is there such a thing as a higher class of criminal? Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, it all depends on what you're thinking. You have some criminals out there who are making hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And then you have some people, white collar crime, who are extorting in various functions and who aren't getting their hands dirty and who isn't going out there or hurting people. They just maybe know how to cook some numbers and cook the books to make it look like they're getting their money clean when they're really not. So I guess I think it depends on your perspective, because when it's all said and done, there's some people who may do their crime in a way where it looks cleaner and it's not as violent, and they're not out there slinging dope or something like that, but they're still taking advantage of people. They're still harming people, if that makes sense. Do police canines live at officers' homes, or are they housed at a facility? I believe that they live with them. I'm pretty sure, so they can develop that bond. But I'm pretty sure that's the case, because if I'm thinking of it, you had to have a home here in Vegas to be a canine officer, because the dog needs to be able to run and do stuff like that. At least that's the standard here. Now, I don't know what the standard may be in some other jurisdictions, but it was definitely the case here. Let me see here. Thanks for stopping by, y'all. I definitely appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it. Great conversation. Great questions. Are there religious gangs? From my experience, I would say yes. But I would say from my knowledge, not necessarily from my experience. Because I would say that in a lot of gangs, there's an aspect, especially in some Hispanic gangs, cartel-wise, there's a lot of aspects of some form of distorted version of Roman Catholicism. And if you want to go even deeper, when you're talking about like Islamic groups, I think that, and I'm primarily speaking from a point of like a terroristic group. You definitely might be dealing with the issue of religious belief being at the center of it all, because ultimately it's about the infidel and the righteous, as they would call them. Is it Gadiel? If I'm not getting your name right, forgive me. Thinking of going into law enforcement. Thanks for all of your insight. You're the voice of reason. God bless you. Let me tell you that right now. Thank you for the advice. And by the way, if it's, I don't know how soon you are in the process of looking to go into law enforcement, but I'm working on a program that, if you stay tuned to what I'm doing, maybe even hit me up after we get done here. I'm actually considering working on something, as crazy as it may be in this climate right now, but I'm actually thinking about putting something together to help people who want to be in law enforcement. So hit me up after this. Send me a Facebook. I don't know whether you're familiar with me on YouTube or Facebook. Either way, send me a message and I'll get back to you on that. But thanks again. Have police departments ever considered using other kinds of weapons akin to swords or bows? Not that I know of. I mean, we have batons and stuff like that, but I think nowadays, I mean, just imagine if someone showed up. Like I said, you have a bow. We have an expandable baton. I still have a couple of them here that I personally bought. But so you have something that could be used as an offensive weapon, or I used to love the PR-24 because it was like you had the handle, and then you had the main shaft of it all, and it could be used like to deflect, but then also you can turn it around and use it as an offensive tool, or also a way to pry someone's arms free. If sometimes people don't want to give you their hands, they got their hands all tight in front of them, it can help you pry their arms free and get them behind so you can secure them. But imagine if there was an agency that came out with a sword or something like that today. Oh my gosh, that wouldn't go over well at all. People, they're always talking about demilitarizing the police. That's a term that you hear a lot, and maybe not so much these days, the last few months or so, but it's still there. It's still hot and heavy on a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people don't understand the level of threat that officers face on a pretty regular basis. I often say people forget the Fort Hood shooter. They forget the situations like Columbine. They forget the Post nightclub shooter. They forget the North Hollywood shootout, October 1 here in Vegas. People forget those things. And just having a 45, your handgun, and low-level body armor just isn't always the tool for the job. Sometimes you need a long-range sniper rifle. Sometimes you need a Bearcat, a armored vehicle to go in and extract people. It is a useful tool. We had here in Vegas a dude who was shooting, and he was shooting out of an apartment window, and there were some officers who were pinned down right below the guy under like an awning. And the only way they were able to get out of there, was because of Bearcat, one of the SWAT tactical units, SWAT tactical vehicles, either SWAT or our search and rescue, drove that vehicle up, and they were able to get inside. That was the only way they were able to get out. So most people are just too limited in their perspective on things. They make arguments that sound good, or they hear them over and over again. Defund the police, demilitarize the police. Let's get rid of qualified immunity, without really digging in deep and really understanding the details of what all those things, what will come as a result of that. Thank you, Glenn. Very insightful, particularly from your biblical worldview. Thank you very much. That That is my stance right there. Everything that I do is at its foundation is me as a follower of Jesus. I seek to be consistent. What we got here? Are officers allowed to choose their kinds of gun? I think it depends on the department. I was having a conversation with one of my buddies at church. He's retired LAPD. He was kind of tripping over the idea that many of us on Metro were able to pick and choose our own gun. In LAPD, everybody's got the same kind of gun. I think it's some level of a Glock. Everybody carries the same gun. And I understand the practicality of it all. If you're in a situation and someone runs out of ammo or something like that, you got a guy next to you who's got the same type of magazine and same caliber of bullet. So I can see where that, I can definitely understand that. I personally wouldn't have liked it, but had the department switched over and said, hey, we want everyone to be uniform and with their weapons, I would have understood it. And I think tactically it makes a whole lot of sense. But I think it primarily depends on the department. I love my 45 as my primary duty weapon, and then I carried a 9mm on my ankle as a backup. So I was always rocking. I had an extra mag in my pocket for my 9mm, and I carried about 7 magazines, three on the holster, on my duty belt rather, and 1 in the magazine well. So I carried, and each one was 15 rounds, and I usually kept it 14 or so. So I tried to be well prepared while I was out there. And I was already a big dude. I was walking around about 260, I was pretty fit, but I needed to clean up my diet. I worked out pretty good, but I needed to clean up my diet. Like right now, I walk around 230, 235, feel way healthier, way fitter. My mind is way more clear. Let me tell y'all a quick story. During the last few years while I was on the department, I dealt with a lot of memory issues. My mind just seemed like it wasn't working right at all. I couldn't remember at times basic paperwork. I couldn't remember at times how to fill out certain forms. I couldn't remember at times what to do on some calls that I may not do on a more consistent basis. And I used to sit back and I thought there was something wrong with me. I remember going to the doctor and I was just like, Doc, my memory's terrible. And they would do all kinds of neurological tests, nothing. Fast forward, year and a half ago, once I started cleaning up my diet, I started cleaning up my diet probably closer to 2.5 years ago. But let me tell you something. January of 2020, I started keto. And I know people have different perspectives. I'm telling you my story. I started a healthy ketogenic diet. Dr. Berg on YouTube, if you're not familiar with him, the dude is a wealth of knowledge in the area of nutrition and health and fitness. Nutrition and health primarily. I started a healthy, clean keto diet. Plenty of green leafy vegetables every day. I supplement in the areas that where I might be lacking nutrition. I don't take protein or anything like that. Just some of the things I mentioned earlier. If you want to go back and check out the video if you're just showing up. And I do intermittent fasting on a daily basis. I used to just eat 2 meals a day. Now I'm a 1 meal a day guy. I'll have an occasional snack to help tide me over, but I'm a 1 meal a day, and I eat a big meal. It's like a feast. That's my meal. And I eat slow so I don't get overgorged or anything like that, but I get full when I'm done. I'm not just, I feel a little better. No, I'm full when I'm done. So I fast throughout the course of the day, and then like I said, so I'm fasting most of the day, and then I eat a good meal. Since I switched over my diet and I cut out the sugar, and I dramatically decreased my carb intake, my brain operates on a level that it hasn't in decades. And I'm 51 now. More clarity on a daily basis. I feel so much healthier. I was dealing with all kinds of medical problems. I've always had high blood pressure since I was a teenager. My blood pressure has dropped tremendously. I was dealing with kidney issues. My kidney functions are up, functioning at a much better level, or like they're at a level they should be, normal. Cholesterol levels were very problematic at times. And I think that's because I eat more healthier fats these days. But you name it, heart, heart, blood pressure, kidneys, brain fog is gone. Changed everything for me. Changed everything. And I wish I had known all that back then, because I literally felt like I was an idiot. Like I couldn't remember anything. But anyway, hey y'all, thank you for swinging by. I want to do more lives, and I try to put the information out there sooner so I can get more people coming by and checking me out and jumping in. If you have any conversations, any ideas that you think you would love to hear me discuss, feel free to send me a message. Facebook on Code Red Conversations, on YouTube at Code Red Conversations. I'm at Code Red Conversations on Instagram. Go check out Code Red Conversations. I wish I had my new t-shirts. I have new t-shirts up. Y'all got to check them out. I'll take some pictures and I'll post them up. Y'all go to coderedconversations.com/shop and check out my merchandise page so you can support what it is we're trying to do here. Because unfortunately, for the editing material and the speakers and cameras and all that kind of stuff, it takes money. It's not cheap. So if you can support me in any way as I seek to move and get the message out there and help people have a different perspective on law enforcement, I would greatly appreciate it. Once again, it's coderedconversations.com. coderedconversations.com/shop. And if you would like to hear me come to maybe your church or maybe your youth group, I'm developing a message on safe police interactions I can't even say primarily for young people, for folks in general. I have my police brutality, separating fact from fiction presentation. I'm just trying to get people to think a little bit differently. That's my primary goal. I want people to think a little bit differently about law enforcement and understand how sometimes they're being manipulated by a media that doesn't necessarily always have your best intentions. So if you would love for me to come speak at a community group, at your church, hit me up. We can figure out the details of it, figure out the costs. But I'm more than willing. I would love the opportunity to do that. I think it would be a blessing, and for me as well as for you and your audience. But once again, thanks for checking me out. I will be sharing with y'all my new swag, my new t-shirts I'll probably post it tomorrow. Again, I appreciate y'all taking time out of your day to come and engage in this conversation. Stay tuned, y'all. I'm still doing my 45-day challenge. Don't forget that. I'm posting out new content every day. And I'll probably be doing a whole lot more lives. So give me some ideas to work with. I want to serve y'all to the best of my ability. In the meantime, you know how we do it. Stay safe, God bless, and make sure you join the conversation. Peace.